This video is going to continue my discussion about cognitive dissonance. If you need a reminder, cognitive dissonance is that feeling of discomfort you get when you behave in a manner that doesn't match with your view of yourself or with your attitudes. It's when you do something that doesn't make sense given the attitudes that you hold. Now, previously I talked about the classic Fessinger and Carl Smith study about cognitive dissonance, and now I'm going to talk about some other examples of cognitive dissonance in action. One area of fruitful research in this area is how members of cults behave and stay in cults. So we know what a cult is. A cult is, a group of people. It kind of looks like a religion, except it has more coercive tactics for keeping people in, not letting them leave. People are almost tricked, or at least persuaded, to stay in cults with strategies like having them gradually devote more and more and more to a cult, having them cut off contact with friends and family so that they are less likely to question the cult. And so the thing about cults is a lot of people would wonder, well, why do people join these? It doesn't matter. To us, it's obvious that that is a toxic group. And they have ridiculous beliefs. Why? Why would people join? Why would people stay? And one person who studied this was Fessinger, who we mentioned previously with the Fessinger and Carl Smith study. He also studied cults, in particular Doomsday cults. These are cults who are focused on the end of the world. They believe they know when the end of the world is coming, and they're preparing for the end of the world. And he actually conducted a study where he joined one of these cults and kind of got to observe from the inside, and specifically to see how they reacted when the end of the world that they were waiting for, that they had predicted, that it didn't actually come. He wanted to see how they dealt with the cognitive dissonance that results in the prophecy not coming true, essentially. And there were different types of reactions. One thing that you can do is you can deal with the cognitive dissonance by giving up on the cult and cutting your losses and getting away from that. But many people dealt with this, because this was observed, they dealt with the cognitive dissonance by doubling down on their faith and their belief. They would convince themselves, well, we were actually right, but we were saved at the last minute. We were actually right. This was a test of our faith. So rather than saying, we were wrong when faced with evidence that they were wrong, they doubled down and became stronger in their belief and their devotion and their dedication to the cult. All right. And so cognitive dissonance can make us behave irrationally. It can make us behave in a way that doesn't make sense to other people. We are very reluctant as human beings to admit that we've done something foolish. All right. So rather than admit that we've done something foolish, we will just keep continuing until it pays off. We will just keep at it to be like, I will not admit that I did something that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to just wait until it starts to make sense. I'm just going to double down in my devotion. And people will do this. Now, some other historical examples that have been explained through cognitive dissonance by social psychologists include things like the Vietnam War. All right, if you know anything about the Vietnam War, it went on for a while. It didn't seem like we were going to have much of success, of victory. Lots of lives were being lost without much payoff in terms of progress, success. And so President Johnson, right? President Johnson was the president after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. President Johnson was very reluctant to pull out of the Vietnam War. And so he was very stubborn, and he gave lots of justifications for why we needed to continue. Because the thing is, quitting means admitting that these lives were lost for no good reason. Admitting that all these resources were devoted to a futile cause. So rather than admitting that mistakes had already been made, they were stubborn and stuck with it. Right? So that is one example. Another example involves President Nixon. If you do not remember who Nixon is, he was the one who got in trouble. You know, he resigned before he was impeached, but he got in trouble for the Watergate scandal. There was a break-in at the headquarters for the rivals. Turns out he was behind it, or at least linked to, at least linked to it. And so, it was this big scandal, and he came up with justifications for the Watergate affair. And a lot of people have said that his reason for trying to make it make sense is, rather than saying, I did a bad thing, he instead tried to reduce cognitive dissonance by saying, no, actually, I did not do a bad thing. Let me tell you how this was justified. This was good, what I did. All right, so that's another example of dealing with cognitive dissonance. And then another example, and I could give more than this. I could give some recent examples, but I'm almost hesitant to get into current events. But the final example that I'll give in this video is George W. Bush and when we went to war in Iraq. His big thing was, well, there's weapons of mass destruction. We're going to go and find the weapons of mass destruction. And weapons of mass destruction are, most people would say that's a sufficient justification for going to war. If another country has weapons of mass destruction, they can do a lot of damage, and you want to stop them. But then we didn't find any evidence whatsoever for weapons of mass destruction. It was not there. We couldn't find any weapons of mass destruction. And so instead of saying, oh, my bad, instead of saying, oh, we were wrong, let's go ahead and leave, he was stubborn. He would not give up. He had ever shifting justifications. He kept coming up for new, different reasons that we got to do this. We got to stick with this. And so even though there was never any evidence for the weapons of mass destruction, and that was supposed to be the justification, he kept trying to present new justifications to be like, no, this makes sense what we're doing. We have to keep going, because we are really reluctant to say, actually, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this. Let's stop. All right. And if anybody gets upset and responds and saying, oh, you're pushing your political views, these examples come from the textbook, right? They come from the textbook, which is based on actual research. Actual social psychologists did this research. They published these ideas. This is not my agenda. This is fitting with theory and observations from actual, previously published research. I always like to point out, because sometimes students will, if you mention anything that has anything to do with politics, they're like, well, that's just your personal opinion. Whoa, 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 whoa. Didn't come from my head. I'm filtering it through my head, but came from other sources. All right, again, cognitive dissonance happens all the time, and we do all sorts of ridiculous things to deal with cognitive dissonance. If you are not comfortable finding examples of cognitive dissonance and self-justification in your own life, think of your friends. I guarantee you can easily think of examples of friends and family doing something that was absolutely ridiculous, and you could probably explain it by them trying to deal with cognitive dissonance, with not admitting that they had done something foolish and trying to deal with it by keep continuing to do the foolish thing, or doing some new other foolish thing to deal with the cognitive dissonance. Just to give you one more example, you buy a car, turns out it's a dud of a car, and you don't want to admit that you spent all your hard-earned, hard-saved money on something that, that doesn't work out for you. You will try to come up with all sorts of stuff to justify that cognitive dissonance. You'll be like, well, at least it's a cool car. It looks good, even if it doesn't run well. Or, well, at least I can give my friends a ride, even though it's always breaking down and they're late for class all the time because I'm trying to give them a ride. Or you will just minimize. You'll be like, no, I haven't had to take it to the shop that often. Like, you took it to the shop twice this semester. No, it actually runs really well. I like this car. Think of it. You can find those examples in the world of people dealing with cognitive dissonance in a way that makes us look like irrational human beings.